Thanks for joining our live broadcast. I think this is pretty fun to be here with both of you.
We've already been having fun.
and just hearing you discuss different topics. So, why don't we start with, if anyone is watching, they're probably already seen me share some of the work from both of you, or they've heard me mention you. But if anyone is not familiar, could you both just give a brief intro on yourself and what you do?
I go first? Okay.
My Italian friend will not forgive me if I went first.
I'm Wendy Murdoch, and I teach people how to use their body to ride more effectively so that the horse can respond in the way that's most efficient. Like, in other words, if I use my body efficiently, the horse is going to be able to do what I want. And that's primarily what I do, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, my name is Angelo Telatin, and my focus of study was the psychology of learning applied to equine training technique. So with the use of the notion of the psychology, what works on the training technique and what doesn't work, and most importantly, I think you say, and it's like how is the horses think? How can you use that knowledge to make everything simple, easy, and like happening? And we were talking 1 second before. That her work is actually very, very important, and I always stressed during my clinic, because without an effective position, you can control your cues in the way that the psychology of learning require. So most of the horses' confusion or bad behavior or misbehavior or challenging the leadership of the rider, they're actually poor cues that the horse read as what we were asking, just for faulty positions or.
Yeah, in many ways, the horse is actually responding to the poor position and doing what the rider has said unintentionally.
Exactly.
So the rider thinks, I'm asking my horse to turn, but their body weight is going to the outside, so the horse can't turn. Then the horse gets in trouble because he's not turning. So then the horse is going to misbehave. Then we have the psychology of the horse who's saying, I can't do this. And we're misunderstanding, I think, the way you would talk about it. We're misunderstanding what the horse is trying to tell us.
Yeah, and actually you just said one thing that triggered me, another further comment. When you said, so if you have a faulty position, you're going to make the same mistake. And which 90% is going to end up in terms of pressure and release, you're going to release the pressure at the same time and the same point of the exercise. Because you have a faulty position in that moment. And that, for the horse, is a pattern. So once the horse finds that you are releasing in that moment at the same time, for the horse, that is a request. It's actually a legitimate request that you're doing. And so he's giving you that request. And then you're like, what are you doing? I'm not asking you this one. And I found a quote that I wrote on my phone, and I was deleting stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that quote. And that was, just because you are not thinking it doesn't mean you're not doing it or it's not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of go with that is you can't think a thought without a movement. But if your thought is an incorrect movement, you keep thinking, like, I'm turning, but you're actually not turning and making the horse's job harder. So I brought Ned. Ned is always somewhere lurking nearby because this is the frame that we have to work with, and the law we can't escape is gravity. And so if, we were talking earlier about horses are motor-based, and if my body is giving the horse an incorrect signal, but I do it repeatedly, he's going to think that's what I want, and it's not really what I intended. And so then the disconnect is, you think you're asking the horse to do something, but you're really messaging something completely different with your body, and so he can't get it.
Yeah. And to speak of that one, I always make this, no joke, but I say these things. A lot of time when I teach, I come into this scenario. So you have a horse that is picking up the canter, perfectly at home. Then you go to a horse show, and the horse is more tense, you're a little more tense, etc. The canter is not coming out. So here you're at a canter, now have your leg, and then so the rider now, let's say you're asking for the right leg canter. And so now the rider is like in that position for the canter departure, and then it's like kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking, because that's for the rider the canter position. And so if the horse is not listening to the aid, you need to intensify, and you're like, and like, whoa, relax, relax. And I said, just shake your hip. And then the horse picks up the canter. And I said, because I was watching you, I said, and before giving the leg, you've always done this. And if you watch, a lot of riders pick up the canter first with their body and then with the leg. So now, if you are punishing, I said, you need to punish more with your hip than with the leg, because the horse has no idea what your legs is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And, you know, body awareness, whether it's what we're actually doing with our, well, that's the thing, is we're not aware of what we're doing. We're not taught how to use our body or where the body parts are. And so then we have this very generalized sense of how we're asking the horse to do something. And one of the things that you probably see quite often that I do is people want to exaggerate their aids. But in that exaggeration, they're actually knocking the horse off balance or making it harder for the horse, because, you know, if I exaggerate and I lean way over, now he's got to deal with my weight over here, when really all I wanted him to do was make a slight turn. And so, you know, I make it really hard for him to really just do the little things, so then he has to go somewhere else and then finally get back there, and there's this whole delay. And then if I get anxious at the horse show and I'm tense and I think I'm doing that same thing, but I'm not, because I'm unaware of my body, and I didn't realize now I'm holding my breath and trying to lean, putting my weight somewhere else, and the horse can't get it. Because horses need consistency to understand what we are asking. And that's, I always tell you, if you're really consistent, the horse will figure it out, even if it's a negative aid, because it's consistent.
It's consistent. And speaking of that, my favorite joke, my favorite challenge when I go to a horse show is I've always, oh, sorry, not a horse show, when I go to do clinic, is I look around, and usually up to one or two horses in the clinic comes with a lot of problems between the connection, mouth, reins, hands. And so the rider is like, oh, I can't get him to do this, I can't get him to do this, it's a nightmare. And normally, but they're good horses, so the horses are still performing good, they're still going out to horse show, they're still going out in dressage. So that means that I'm in front of a good horse that can get score because either get rails because it's keep tossing, or get a low dressage score because it's not performing well. Those horses, 99%, what they have done is they have excluded completely the cue that comes from the hands because they are inconsistent, and they have only picked up the cue that comes from the body because they're more consistent. If I turn and my hand is like this, I still like turn with this part of the body all the time. And so I take the bridles off, I put the collar, and magically those horses like, thank God, thank you, thank you, thank you. They just relax their head, and to the surprise of the rider, they just like keep following the same cue. They're actually perfect. They keep going. If it's a dressage pattern, they're perfect there. If it is show jumping, they usually they snap faster with their front leg because they can use the neck as a vasculatory. Vascular. And yeah, so it's amazing, like you said. It's the horse just picks up the most consistent cue that we do, even if we're unaware that we're doing.
Right, and that's the thing. And you know, when we think about our body, we are very aware of our hands. I always say, you know, if you get a paper cut on your lip or on your finger, it feels huge. So there's certain parts of our brain that are have our body that have more allocation in the brain. Our hands, our feet, our lips, our eyes, our ears. And then the part of the body that's doing the most information to the horse is the seat and the lower back and the thighs, but we have so little awareness of that part of our body typically, and so we don't even know what we're doing there, and then we try to use the parts we're aware of to make the changes. And riding so often focuses on hands and feet and forgets the part that really is in contact with the horse.
Yeah.
So.
And when I was younger and I was teaching kids, at one point I stopped speaking because I realized that it was non-useful, because if you talk, then they go in a weird position. And I had an awesome pony that I could ask the pony even canter and stop. So she would canter and I could stop her on one stride canter. And it was amazing because their motor skills are still developing.
Yeah.
You put them on the seat bones, like you said, you put them on the seat bone on the saddle, and I was not giving them stirrup and no rein. And you would see them like, even at the sitting trot, you would see them like doing like this and then slowly centering themselves here.
Yep.
And in 4 lessons, I remember, 4 lessons, every kid were able to do walk, trot, canter with no problem. And then after 4 lessons, I was giving them rein and stirrup. And then we were starting the uphill battle of posting, etc. But those kids, 90% would never fall off, and if the horse would take off, they would just go back and then stop the horse using the core without even
Not
it.
thinking, yeah. And that's the piece that I find is so critical, is that we have to get out of the thinking and into the motor function.
Yeah.
That riding is motor function, and so often it's taught either visually or with words instead of with movements. And we really need to get to accurate movements.
So if someone is listening there and you are not an instructor and you hear your instructor telling you do this, and then you can't, and then the instructor tells you the second time gently and you don't do it, then he tells you the third time and you start getting like anxious. I am telling you these things for the 10th time and you're still not doing it, blaming on you. Remember that the instructor, the Einstein, said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So if he keeps telling you in the same way, he's going to get the same result. He needs to move to a kinesthetic teaching and change it. Even in kinesthetic teaching, some exercise work for someone and don't work for other. You have to invent sometimes, like at the moment. And if the third time it doesn't work, it's the instructor that needs to change something.
So I always say, if I say it 3 times, I've got to change what I'm doing, or
Yeah.
I'm not seeing the change in the person. And that's and I always tell people, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I'm not really teaching anything different. I just teach in many, many different ways the same thing, because every student hears it a little differently. And so I just have to tailor what I'm saying to that individual and find out what makes sense to that individual, as opposed to trying to make them fit into my pattern.
Yeah.
And that's, and the other thing that's really fascinating, so I set up a balance trail for people, and I set up all these different obstacles for them to stand on. And then I let them walk through the first time by themselves, and they're fine, they can all balance. And then the second time I push on them, and almost every person falls over. And then, yeah, you've been there.
Thankfully, they don't completely fall over. You
But
catch them.
they catch themselves. Yeah, I will catch them, but they're out of balance, and you see the arms come out, just like in riding, or they pull back, or they do something to protect themselves. And because we're going to save our head, we're going to do what we need to. But that.
Except lately. It's been falling off like
Oh,
part
no,
of
yeah,
my head. That's okay.
But then when I go to show them a better position, like I'll put my hand on their back first to say, find my hand, and they'll throw some other body part around, because they're so habituated to doing what some instructors told them that is not effective. So I'll put my hand here and say, fall back into my hand. They go, and then they can't get to my hand. And you can see their thought in action. That is why they're not successful. That is why they're struggling and they don't get the result they're looking for. Because the thought associated, or the movement associated with that thought is not useful. But it's what we've been told to do over and over: sit up straight, shoulders back, chest out, and instead of really understanding what the heels down, what the function really, really is, and that we have to have this solid position, like we were saying earlier. You've got to be in the place where you can wait for the horse to respond, as opposed to being out of balance and then making it harder for the horse to do what you ask, because he's got to deal with your falling.
Yeah. It's really fun listening to it too, because this is like the conversation that goes on in my own inside my head. Because I found you around the same time. I think I started riding with you a little bit first, because I actually remember specifically in the first lesson that I took with you at Sue's old place, and you did, where you stand on the mounting block and you pushed on my back and pushed here on my chest and maybe steadier. And I was happy because, you adjusted a few things, but you were like, oh, you're pretty steady. Usually I can push people around more. And you said, who have you been riding with? And I said, Angelo. And I was really happy, because I knew that if it had been just like 6 months prior, I would have been moving a lot more.
Yeah, you were actually.
But
one of the skills that you have and still have is that ability to be so soft and so athletic, that you had learned your own way to absorb everything from the horse, but not do anything. So the hardest thing was like to create. There is an interesting vet from Germany, and he's talking about the horses and this whole role curve versus. So but he's saying something that is for us too, that a rider in reality, because it's on a stiff position, it can be stiff, or it can be, he called it positive tension, like the same one that has the people that do ballroom. So if you see them, they're like completely, like they look completely stiff. But then when they start dancing, it's all a positive tension. So they are on a posture, but they're so elastic and movable that posture allow them to do all those movements.
Right.
And so if we try to replicate, we are like actually stiff, but we can't do all of that things. Or we're so soft that we can't hold for certain spins or something, and so then it doesn't work either.
Yeah, there's got to be this balance between stability and movement, and it's where are we stable and where do we have to allow movement, and finding that right combination that marries to the horse's body.
A random question that I have is, if there was, for each of you, if there's one thing that you could like really impress on horse owners, on riders, what would it be?
Body awareness. They've got to understand how their body moves and how it functions so that they can do what they want on the horse. And without that, they're guessing. And the horse is having to try and figure it out. And if they're not consistent, the horse is the one who's struggling.
Yeah, and I jump on that one because it's my same topic. So if you don't have body awareness, this is what happens normally with your horses. So people has been taught that the horses are repetitive, so that they're not smart, and you have to repeat a lot of exercises almost every day, otherwise they forget what you're doing. And then I always tell them these things. I says, okay, let's assume that this is true. Then you have to tell me that when something bad happened, they do it once, maximum twice, it's effective, and they remember forever. You don't even need to repeat it for a month, and then they'll remember. So if they have that ability, why wouldn't they have the ability to learn the right thing in the same pattern? And they actually do. So if you can't get that one, that means that you are not body aware, so you're sending all wrong cue that the horse is like lost or is learning. So you do three things the same thing that is wrong. The horse learns, so you spend the whole hour to make the horse forget what you just taught them and try to teach the right thing. Or instead of doing mentally, so making the horse understand, you do it mechanically. So you move their body, and it happens because you move their body, but the horse doesn't understand what you are asking. So that's, yes, tomorrow you have to do it again and again and again, because the horse never learned what he was supposed to do. You just made him do mechanically, not mentally.
Yeah.
What's a favorite like moment that stands out for you in your whole careers, both even just when you were learning to ride, riding for fun, and then into being professionals?
A long time to think about it.
Something's got to stand out.
My accident?
I'll go.
And the
Well,
horse flipped on top of me?
I just fell off 3 days ago twice on the head. So all my colleagues and the doctor says, no, change horse for a little while, but I'll make it with him. We'll fix it. No, I actually remember one specific, so I'll go first in this case. So it was during my study of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and I developed, it's called differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior. So I developed a training that you teach an incompatible behavior, which is still, that is against the movement. So if you need to give an injection or fly spray or clipping, and the horse is trying to avoid everything, but if you teach the horse that if he stills, you go away, then he's using the still to make you go away. And then when he's like all happy that he got it, and you start actually giving the injection, he's still still, you give the injection, you go away, the horse is still thinking, I see, I got you going away. But during this whole like process, there was a horse, I remember, so we clicker trained him, it was perfect, and so now I'm going there, I'm thinking, well, I show him the clipper, And when I activate the clipper, I click, and it didn't work. So then I'm thinking, okay, I'm using the clipper as a clicker. So I go there, and I like food, bzz, food, bzz, and it took 3 repetitions. So he came to get the food 3 times, and then he realized that if he takes the food, the clipper goes on. That was it. Like it didn't come anymore. And that's when I start thinking, oh my God, like how fast are they like to learn stuff?
Oh.
And then I'm like, and now what do I do? And that's when I had the idea, well, let's reverse. So I turned the clipper on, he just jumped out in the air, and then he landed with 4 feet. As soon as he landed with the 4 feet, I turned it off. I did 2 times, and then he's like, oh my God, if I plant my feet, the clipper stopped. And at the 3rd like time, I turn it on, and he would do this, and he just like learned the pattern. So it was a horse that the owner were not even blanketing because he couldn't clip him. So he wanted to build winter coat so then he would be warm. And in 2 weeks, I didn't even have the chance because I was waiting for the camera to arrive to videotape the before. And by the time that the camera arrived, I hadn't known before because the horse was like letting me clip all over the places. So that was my like, oh my God, they are that fast.
They're that fast. They really
Yeah.
are. They're so fast, and that's
a problem.
it's actually not a problem because
No,
if
but
we
I'm saying-
recognize they're that fast,
Yeah,
then we
but
realize
we're
we've
slow.
got to get
We're slow.
faster.
Yeah, but we're slow.
But we
matter-
can be faster.
Yes, we can, but no matter how we try, they're faster.
And this is where, like I started doing Surefoot 5 years ago, and in 10 seconds I watched a horse completely change
Yeah.
standing on a pad. And that's when I realized they're just waiting for us to say it to them in a way that's profound to them.
Yeah.
They're just constantly waiting for us to figure it out. And when I realized that in under 10 seconds, that horse could completely change its balance, I realized they're just waiting for us.
Yeah, but I found out that certain horses, so the best way to explain their memories, like how their brain works, sometimes they use the idea that they have like picture of events. So sometimes, and I call them, they have a database, a data bank with a lot of picture. So when you have a horse that has done a lot of misbehave versus a cue, and you want to now change it, you need to build like 1,000 more good picture. So when he goes back into, now he has a data bank like bigger on the good things, and it's more likely going there than going on the.
Isn't that the same as people?
Yeah, but we pretend that we have a little more like cognitive going.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. So if you find certain horses that their database is so wide against like the non-cooperative responses, with that one person that has the right timing, you might be able to put a lot of good in it, but it's enough like a small change in something, and they quickly go back to the database that was wrong. And that's kind of sad. I'm always sad when I see those horses because someone are really, and usually they are the most intelligent and the most athletic. And I always think like, gosh, if that horse would have been started in the right way.
But how often do I say that about riders if the rider
Yeah,
is started
same
in the
thing,
right
yeah.
way? Because if you start young, the brain is malleable and you can
You're
put
right.
those programs in, like you just said with the kids that you put on the pony that can
Yeah.
do the canter walk.
Exactly.
And if we can get those programs early on, they're in the data bank and they're going to be the strong ones.
Yeah.
And they can refer back to them.
Would it bring it back
Education.
to a little bit more of a fun topic? At first, I thought it was funny when I mentioned favorite moment. You both thought of a fall.
No,
You
she
thought-
I
started
thought
the fall.
the accident changed my life in under 10 seconds.
She
Yeah.
started the fall, and then she made me remember. No, I got that one. That's like printed in my head. That
Yeah.
moment with that horse, Willie was the horse. No, but then she mentioned the fall. Like, unfortunately, we shouldn't say, but unfortunately, we fall off a lot. So we shouldn't.
I don't know about you. I don't fall off. I just rode in Africa, and we just went on safari and swam across the Mara River with hippos in
No,
the
I normally don't fall off, but I had this challenging horse that is, he got, how do you say, discharged because he had behavioral problem in a horse show and at home, so he couldn't be adopted out.
Oh,
it couldn't be adopted to a professional because he doesn't, he knows how to not go to a horse show, and it can be adopted to a beginner because he knows how to back people up. So we've been working on it, but he's a good jumper.
Did you think of a favorite moment?
Well, I think, and given the story that Angelo said, my favorite moment is when I discovered Surefoot, because in 10 seconds I recognized that I found a way to show people that horses are listening all the time. And if Surefoot, the pads underneath the horse's feet. And when you put a pad underneath the horse's foot and you watch him stand on it for 10 seconds and its behavior is completely different, you realize that their feet are sensory organs, and we have to communicate through the sensory organ of their feet, because that's how they meet the ground. And if that foot isn't meeting the ground in a secure way, they're not getting the feedback they need to be in balance in their world.
Yeah, that's why I've become a big fan, even if I shouldn't. I'll give you credit now, so he'll be happy when he sees the video. That's why I became a big fan of barefoot too. Not because I don't believe in shoeing, because one of my best friend is a farrier, and he shoes really. He's a genius. But when I left him to come here to America, the feet of my horses were like changing. Every farrier that I was changing, the feet were like changing constantly. I had toes out, chronically toes out, and they were turning me into a fake toes in.
Yeah.
And so I was desperate. And after changing a couple of farriers, I said, I may as well try these barefoot things. It was many years ago. I was curious. So I pulled the shoes out. I started doing all the trimming, etc. And the feet went back to the same shape that my friend was doing it. So I'm not against shoeing, but like you said, you just change a little bit the digital axis of a horse, and basically you compromise the whole horse.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts?
No, this is great. I've heard about you for a long time, so
Yeah,
it's
me
really
too.
fun
It
to
was
sit
fun to
here and
meet
have
you
a
in
great
person.
chat.
Yeah.
And,
And always I say to people, like you said, knowledge, information. Don't stop when they tell you something, and you ask, and the answer is because either I said so, because everybody did like this, or because it's been done like that. It's always like doubt it as a per se. You have no idea how many false statements are around horses, and with just a simple reasoning, you can destroy them. And
yeah.
so that's it.
Yeah. Thank you both.